when backfires swept through L.A. The world criticized nature. Barron Trump still discovered commodity far more minatory. In early January 2025, Los Angeles set up itself under siege. As grim backfires tore through the region, the deers, driven by fierce Santa Ana winds, consumed vast swaths of land, leaving desolation in their wake. Over 10,000 structures were reduced to ash, and the fires claimed at least 11 lives, forcing further than 180,000 residents to flee their homes. Amidst this chaos, the Trump family had traveled to California for a series of engagements. Barron Trump, now 18 and a beginner at New York University, accompanied his parents on this trip, while his father, President Donald Trump, attended a fundraiser in the Los Angeles area. Barron set up himself with time to explore the megacity. As the backfires boosted, the megacity's air grew thick with dank, casting a creepy orange tinge over the skyline. Barron, intrigued by the unfolding disaster, began to follow news reports and social media updates nearly. He noted the wide destruction in areas like Pacific Palisades, where multimillion bone homes were reduced to debris, and the major Will Rogers Ranch was lost to the deers. But commodity caught his attention, an unusual pattern in the locales where the fires had burned. While utmost people concentrated on the sheer scale of the disaster, Barron noticed that the ignition points sounded to align in a peculiar line, nearly as if following a deliberate path. This observation sparked his curiosity, compelling him to claw deeper into the available data and reports. He began by mapping the reported ignition spots, using public information from news outlets and sanctioned fire department releases. The more he colluded, the clearer the pattern came. The fires appeared to have started in a sequence that suggested further than just arbitrary circumstances or the result of natural causes. Barron participated his findings with his parents who, though preoccupied with their commitments, encouraged him to pursue his curiosity, but advised caution undeterred. He reached out to original authorities and fire experts, hoping to partake his compliances and gain farther sapience still. His inquiries were met with dubitation. Officers were overwhelmed with managing the extremity and had little time to entertain propositions from an 18-time-old anyhow of his background. Some dismissed his compliances as bare concurrence, while others assured him that the professionals were handling the situation. Despite the discharges, Barron's conviction grew stronger. He could not shake the feeling that there was a deliberate hand behind the disaster. Determined to uncover the verity, he decided to probe further on his own, ignorant of the troubles and challenges that lay ahead. But as Barron excavated deeper into the riddle, he would soon find himself entangled in a web of secrets that some would go to great lengths to keep retired. The scale of destruction caused by the backfires was unlike anything Los Angeles had seen in times. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to smoldering remains, and thick bank turned daylight into a dim, climactic haze. Exigency harbors were overflowing with displaced families, relating harrowing escapes from the advancing deers. In areas like Malibu and Calabasas, luxury estates that formerly stood as symbols of wealth and security were now indistinguishable. Piles of ash and debris. Thoroughfares were eerily silent, except for the hum of fire exchanges and copters dropping water on the holocausts. Wildlife, too, suffered immensely, with thousands of acres of niche destroyed and creatures fleeing to suburban neighborhoods. In despair for the residers, the situation felt hopeless. The backfires, banged by gusts exceeding 60 long hauls per hour, were spreading faster than constrained sweats could keep up. Firefighters, formerly exhausted from battling former blazes, worked around the timepiece. Images of them collapsing from sheer prostration came emblematic of the mortal cost behind the heroic sweats to control the fires. Barron, meanwhile, was deeply affected by the stories he encountered. During a visit to an evacuation center in Santa Monica, he eavesdropped a tearful mama, relating how she had just twinkles to snare her children and escape before their home was consumed by deers. Another man showed Barron a print of his prized, quaint auto collection, Now just a pile of scorched essence. But what stuck with Barron most was a firefighter's story about the odd timing and locales of the fires. It's nearly like they have got a mind of their own. The man said, shaking his head, "I have been doing this for 20 times, and I have no way seen anything like it. Some of these fires feel to enkindle out of nowhere, by places you'd no way anticipate." These reflections solidified Barron's belief that there was further to the backfires than met the eye. He could not help but suppose back to the strange alignment of ignition points he'd noticed before, determined to learn further. He spent hours digging through online forums and social media where he discovered posts from others who had also observed unusual fire patterns. Some suspected that the fires were the result of wildfire, while others floated more minatory propositions, including commercial sabotage and attempts at forced land accession. One thread in particular caught Barron's attention. A stoner had uploaded drone footage of an area just outside Pasadena, showing what appeared to be an original spark from an object falling from the sky moments before the fire erupted. The videotape, though coarse, was enough to make Barron's palpitation quicken. He saved it incontinently, wondering if this could be the substantiation. He demanded to prove his growing reservations, but the further Barron uncovered, the more dangerous the questions came, pulling him into a maze of query that offered no easy way out. As night fell over Los Angeles, Barron sat in his hostel room with his laptop glowing in the dim light. His office was cluttered with hastily scribbled notes, screenshots from social media posts, and a crude chart of the campfire spread. He goggled hardly at the drone footage he downloaded before replaying it frame by frame. The object in question, a small, bright flare, appeared for only a split alternate before evaporating into the encounter. Moments laterally, the deers erupted. It was creepy. While numerous backfires are sparked by lightning, defective power lines, or neglectfulness, this footage suggested a commodity unnatural. Barron cross-substantiated the footage with newspapers and fire department updates, marking the ignition points on his chart. Each fleck lined up with disturbing perfection, forming a path that stretched from pastoral areas to densely populated neighborhoods. Barron's curiosity turned into preoccupation. He dove into public records, dogging recent land purchases in fire-affected areas. A pattern surfaced: parcels in high-threat zones had been still acquired by a sprinkle of pots in the months leading up to the fires. Barron noted the names of the companies, most of which were shell realities, with little information available online. The deeper he dug, the further questions arose. One pot in particular caught his attention: Sol Vista Effects. The company's name appeared multiple times in recent deals for parcels that had been destroyed by the fires. What stood out was that the purchases were made at exaggerated prices, an odd move for areas prone to natural disasters. Barron felt the weight of what he was uncovering. He called his aged family, Ivanka, to partake his findings. "It just does not add up," he explained. "Why would anyone pay so important for land in fire zones, unless they knew commodity we didn't?" Ivanka heeded patiently, but remained conservative. "Napoleon, this sounds serious, but be careful if you are right. This could involve important people who do not want to be exposed." Her warning only fueled his resoluteness. The coming day, Barron drove out to one of the affected areas, hoping to see the fate firsthand. What he set up left him shaken. Amid the scorched remains of homes and businesses, there were signs of anomalies. In one neighborhood, a line of trees stood untouched, while the houses around them were reduced to ashes. In another, a concrete wall dragged scorch marks on one side, but the other was mysteriously clean. Barron took prints of everything, listing each detail strictly. But as he walked through the remains, he could not shake the feeling that he was being watched. A black SUV idled at the edge of the road, its windows bepainted, too dark to see inside. It did not belong to any exigency askers. Of that he was certain, ignoring the apprehension. Barron continued his attestation, determined not to let fear discourage him. He uploaded his findings to a secure Paul drive, timber sure to back up everything. Latterly that evening, he participated his discoveries on a private forum, hoping to connect with others who might have noticed the same irregularities. Responses poured in nearly incontinently. Roughly druggies thanked him for bringing attention to the anomalies, while others handed analogous accounts from different corridor of California. But one reply stood out, a cryptic communication that read, "You're nearer to the verity than you suppose. Be careful who you trust." Barron did not know it yet, but his disquisition was beginning to draw the attention of people who were far from friendly. The cryptic communication stuck with Barron as he sat alone in his room that night. The flicker of excitement he would felt before now gave way to an uneasy mindfulness of how high the stakes could be. He reviewed his findings again, noting how each piece of substantiation refocused to commodity. Deliberate commodity orchestrated, but by whom and why? Those questions impended over him like murk he could not escape. The coming morning, Barron decided to take his disquisition offline. Stewing. His digital trail might formerly have been compromised. Fortified with a burner phone and a tablet, he set out to solicit original residers in some of the hardest-hit areas. He started in Agora Hills, where several homes had been destroyed. Numerous expatriates were still bivouacked out at temporary harbors, counting on bestowed inventories and staying for updates about their parcels. Barron approached an aged man named Jack, who sat on a folding precedent outside a community center. Jack had lived in the area for decades and had seen his fair share of backfires. "This bone's different," Jack told Barron, his voice coarse from days of breathing in hoarse air. "Fires do not generally burn this way. They're erratic, sure, but this was like a straight shot." When Barron asked about Sol Vista effects, Jack's address shifted. "Yeah, I have heard the name," he said cautiously. "They've been poking around then for months, buying up parcels left and right. People did not suppose much of it at first, until the fire started." Jack's words transferred a bite through Barron. He thanked the man and moved on. But analogous stories began to crop as he spoke with further residers. Several recalled seeing strange exertion in the days leading up to the fires. Low-flying drones, unmarked mileage exchanges, and indeed many loud thunderclaps at odd hours of the night. Barron's coming stop was the megacity of Thousand Oaks, where he met a woman named Elena, who had been vacated from her family's estate. She showed him a series of prints she'd taken on her phone, including one that caught Barron's attention incontinently. A burn point with scorched earth in perfect circles, as if commodity had exploded in multiple places. Contemporaneously, Elena dithered before handing over another print. It was vague but unmistakable. A drone swimming over her property, equipped with what looked like a small barrel attached to its underpart. "I tried reporting this to the authorities," she said, "but they said they were too overwhelmed to probe. I do not suppose they watched." Barron felt a hole in his stomach as he erected the suggestions together. Could drones have been used to start the fires? The study sounded far-brought, but not insolvable, especially given the perfection of the ignition points. He decided to dig deeper into Sol Vista effects, starting with their leadership. That evening, he visited the town Los Angeles Public Library, where he penetrated commercial forums and news libraries. The CEO of Sol Vista Effects was a man named Victor Grayson, a fairly low-profile figure, with ties to several other energy and real estate companies. Barron uncovered suits against Grayson for environmental violations, including illegal fracking operations and land impurity. One composition described Grayson's aggressive drive for land redevelopment projects in campfire-prone areas, frequently lobbying for relaxed regulations to gourmandize track construction after fires. The further Barron learned, the clearer the picture came. The fires were not just a tragedy. They were an occasion. If someone could clear large swaths of land snappily, they could rebuild an enormous profit. But as Barron gathered further information, he could not ignore the growing sense that he was being followed. The black SUV had reappeared before that day, situated near the library's entrance when he arrived, and now as he left with a brochure full of documents, he saw it again, sluggishly running him as he walked to his auto. Barron was getting near to the verity, but the closer he got, the more dangerous his charge came. Barron's heart pounded as he drove through the darkened thoroughfares of Los Angeles. The black SUV was still in his rearview glass, its headlights and portentous presence. He had to suppose snappily, taking a series of sharp turns. He weaved through side thoroughfares and alleys, ultimately pulling into a crowded parking garage. He situated near the exit and ducked behind a pillar, watching as the SUV cruised history without stopping. Relieved but shaken, Barron gripped the brochure of documents he had recaptured from the library. The substantiation gathered was ruinous, but he was not sure how to do. Who could he trust with this information? The authorities had formally dismissed him, and participating it online might only put him in further peril. Barron decided to reach out to someone with further coffers. An intelligencer, he flashed back, a reputed investigative order named Linda Moreno, known for exposing corruption and commercial misbehavior. After many quick quests, he set up her contact information and transferred her and translated dispatch, recapitulating what he'd uncovered. The coming day, Linda agreed to meet Barron at a cafe in Pasadena. She heeded hardly as he laid out the timeline of the fires, the suspicious land purchases, and the implicit involvement of Sol Vista effects. "This is big," she said, her tones. "If what you are saying is true, this could interlace some veritably important people." Linda promised to help Barron corroborate his findings, and offered to use her connections to dig deeper into Sol Vista's conditioning. But she also advised him, "These kinds of stories can make adversaries. Be careful, Barron. You're in over your head." Their discussion was intruded by a loud crash. Outside, Barron turned to see her auto speeding down, its tires screaming as it rounded the corner. Linda's face grew pale. "That's no coexistence," she said. "We need to move." Over the coming many days, Linda and Barron worked lifelessly to uncover further substantiation. Linda used her sources to gain internal emails from Sol Vista, which revealed plans to lobby for expedited reconditioning permits in fire-affected areas. One dispatch in particular caught their attention: a communication from Victor Grayson to a co-worker, agitating accelerating the timeline, and icing spots are cleared. The counter-accusations were clear. Someone was designedly starting the fires to force residers out and make way for redevelopment projects. The sheer audacity of the scheme left Barron and Linda both furious and determined to expose the verity. But their sweats did not go unnoticed. One evening, as Barron returned to his hostel, he set up his room ransacked. Papers were scattered, snuggeries were open, and his laptop was missing. A single note lay on the office: "Stop digging." Barron incontinently called Linda, who prompted him to stay with her until they could figure out their coming move. "They're trying to scarify you," she said, "but this just confirms we are onto commodity." Despite the pitfalls, they pressed on. Linda began drafting a stunner expose, weaving together the substantiation they had gathered. The story was set to reveal the full extent of Sol Vista's corruption and the deliberate destruction of communities for profit. But as the deadline approached, Barron could not shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The walls were closing in, and Barron knew that exposing the verity would come at a cost, one he was not sure he was ready to pay. The day Linda's composition was set to publish, Barron woke up to an alert on his burner phone. The translated dispatch account he had been using to communicate with Linda had been compromised. Someone had penetrated the drafts they were working on. Shocked, he called Linda, but the line went straight to voicemail. Apprehension crept over him as he seized his effects and headed to her apartment. When Barron arrived, he set up Linda's door slightly ajar. Inside, her workspace was in disarray. The walls that had been covered with notes and printouts about Sol Vista effects were stripped bare. Her laptop, camera, and scrapbooks were gone. A single sticky note was left before on her office. In bold black letters it read, "You've been advised." Barron's heart contended. Linda was gone, and so was utmost of the substantiation they had gathered. The only backup remained on Barron's translated Paul's storehouse, but he knew it wouldn't stay safe for long. He incontinently left the apartment, clinging the brochure of documents he had kept with him at all times. Hopeless for help, Barron decided to communicate his father. Though he'd been reticent to involve his family, the situation had escalated beyond what he could handle alone. "Pater," he said over the phone, his voice pulsing, "I need your help. This is bigger than I allowed." Donald Trump, known for his connections and influence, heeded hardly as Barron explained the depth of what he'd uncovered. "You've got guts, kid," his father eventually said, "but you are right. This is dangerous. I will make many calls, but you need to keep your head down and Barron, do and trust anyone." That same day, Barron entered and translated communication from an unknown sender. It contained an attachment labeled Evidence of Operation Phoenix. The train included ruinous substantiation, detailed plans for orchestrating the fires, complete with schematics for the drones, and emails from top directors at Sol Vista, agitating payouts to complicit officers. The communication ended with a nipping line: "Release this, and you will no way see daylight again." Barron knew he could not keep this to himself. He encouraged the train to lend his editor at the investigative outlet she worked for, along with the story they had drafted before her exposure. Within hours, the story broke across major news networks. The expose laid bare the advised destruction of entire communities for fiscal gain, entwining Sol Vista effects and several high-ranking officers. In California, the public response was explosive. Demurs erupted outside Sol Vista's headquarters, demanding justice for the families displaced by the fires. Civil authorities launched an disquisition, and Victor Grayson's face became a symbol of rapacity and corruption. But the fallout was not without its costs. Barron's life was turned upside down as he became a target of scrutiny and media attention. His father's counsels advised him to stay out of the limelight, but Barron refused to back down. "People need to know the verity," he told journalists in one of his many public appearances. Despite the pitfalls and challenges, Barron's conduct led to sweeping reforms in how land accessions were regulated in campfire-prone areas. Sol Vista's means were firmed, and several of its directors were criminated. Victor Grayson still remained at large, reportedly fleeing the country to avoid execution. But indeed, as justice began to take shape, Barron could not forget the warning he'd entered. The shadow of those behind the operation impended large, a memorial that exposing the verity frequently comes with a heavy price. In the weeks following the expose, the world watched as the fallout from the reproach unfolded. News anchors detailed the examinations into Sol Vista effects, the apprehensions of complicit officers, and the growing movement to reform campfire forestallment and response strategies. For the first time, the public began to see the fires not as an willful natural disaster, but as a deliberate, advised act of rapacity. Barron still stayed out of the spotlight. The original media delirium around his involvement had made him a menage name, but it also brought pitfalls and importunity. For his safety, his family arranged for him to leave Los Angeles and dislocate to a secure position until the situation calmed. While Barron appreciated the gesture, he plotted with the weight of everything he had uncovered. He spent his days reflecting on the lives that had been destroyed by the fires, families who had lost their homes, firefighters who had risked their lives, and communities that would no way be the same. Yet amidst the tragedy, there was a sense of stopgap. Barron had seen firsthand how ordinary people could make a difference. Indeed, when the odds were piled against them one autumn, Barron entered and dispatched from a woman he had met at one of the harbors. Her family's home had been destroyed in the fires, but thanks to the public roar and donations sparked by the expose, they were suitable to rebuild. "Thank you for what you did," the dispatch read. "You gave us hope when we had none." The communication reaffirmed Barron's belief in the power of verity. While his trip had been fraught with peril, it had also shown him the significance of standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. He realized that his conduct had sparked further than just outrage. They had inspired change. In the months that followed, new legislation was passed to regulate land purchases in high-threat areas, icing stricter oversight and responsibility. A task force was also established to probe the use of drones and other technologies in felonious conditioning. These measures would undo the damage that had been done, but they were a step toward precluding unborn tragedies. Barron's experience left a lasting print on him. He decided to conduct his energy into activism, using his platform to advocate for environmental justice and commercial responsibility. Though his life had been ever changed by the events girding the backfires, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But Barron knew this was not just his fight. The verity matters, he said in an interview months latterly, and it's over to all of us to make sure it comes to light. The story of the Los Angeles backfires is a memorial of the power of courage and conviction in a world where rapacity and corruption frequently go unbounded. It takes individualities willing to ask the hard questions to uncover the verity. If Barron's story inspired you, consider what conduct you can take to make a difference in your own community. And do not forget, if you enjoyed this story, please like, note, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more stories that count. Together, we can shine a light on the issues that earn attention.